The stars in the Xenon Cluster flickered as if they were dimming their lights in fear. Commander Jaxon Solari stood motionless on the observation deck of the Meridian, his weathered hands pressed against the cold transparisteel. In 30 years of service, through the Epsilon Wars and the Great Rebellion, he had never seen space itself look afraid. A storm was brewing, not of wind and rain, but of something far more terrifying. Something that no one, not even the greatest minds, could predict. "Commander," Dr. Lira Voss's voice cut through the oppressive silence, each word carefully measured despite the tremor he detected beneath. "You need to see this. Now." Solari turned from the viewport where reality rippled like disturbed water. The brilliant scientist approached with trembling hands clutching her datapad, her usually pristine lab coat wrinkled from hours of frantic work. "The gravitational readings." She began, then stopped, swallowing hard. "Jaxon, they're not just off the charts. They're rewriting physics as we know it. These energy signatures, they're older than our civilization. Older than any civilization in our records." The Meridian groaned, actually groaned, as another wave of distortion passed through the cluster. The sound was wrong, like metal weeping. Emergency lights cast everything in hellish red as alarms wailed their electronic warnings. Through the viewport, Solari watched a star blink out of existence, only to reappear 3 seconds later burning blue instead of yellow. "How long?" he asked, though his gut already knew the answer would be insufficient. "At current acceleration." Dr. Voss's voice cracked. 72 hours before the distortions reach critical mass. After that. She gestured helplessly at the chaos beyond the hull. After that, causality itself breaks down. The entire galaxy becomes this. Reports flooded the bridge in a cascade of horror. The merchant vessel Lucky Strike aged 1,000 years in minutes, its crew reduced to dust while their final transmission still echoed across subspace. The military outpost at Kepler Station experienced time in reverse, watching their own destruction unhappen before living it again in an endless loop. And at the edge of the disturbance field, an entire planet's population simply stopped. Not dead. Not alive. Frozen between heartbeats for eternity. Solari activated the ship's intercom, his voice carrying the weight of command and the burden of truth. "All hands, this is your commander. We're heading deeper into the cluster. I won't lie to you, what we're facing defies everything we understand about reality. But if we don't stop whatever's causing these disturbances, there won't be a galaxy left to return to. There won't be a universe left to mourn us." As the Meridian plunged deeper into the cosmic maelstrom, the crew began to feel the touch of something vast and alien. Chief Engineer Torres watched her reflection age and regress in the polished metal of her console. Lieutenant Nash remembered his daughter's wedding, the daughter he'd never had, in a future that might never come to pass. The ship's AI began speaking in languages that predated human speech, its synthetic voice weaving words that hurt to hear. Dr. Voss worked with the desperate intensity of someone holding back the apocalypse with mathematics alone. Deep in the ship's archives, she found fragments, pieces of a puzzle scattered across millennia. The Aetherians. A name whispered in the cosmic wind, a civilization that had touched the face of God and lived to regret it. "Commander," she called, her voice barely audible over the reality storm raging outside. "I found something. These aren't random disturbances, they're the birth pangs of something called a singularity storm. The Aetherians, they created weapons that could unmake existence itself." She pulled up the fragmented data, holographic displays flickering between languages that shifted and changed as they watched. They were masters of cosmic manipulation. They didn't just harness energy, they rewrote the fundamental constants of reality. Made physics their servant. The ancient record spoke of experiments that went beyond science into the realm of cosmic horror. The Aetherians had built machines that could reach into parallel dimensions, weapons that killed their targets by erasing them from all possible timelines, and at the height of their power, devices that could birth new universes or strangle existing ones in their cradle. "The storm isn't just coming," Dr. Voss whispered, her face ashen as the full implications hit her. It's here, and it's unraveling the fabric of the universe itself. But that's not the worst part. She looked up at Solari, her eyes wide with terrified understanding. The storm isn't the weapon. It's the announcement. They're coming back. The Meridian pressed forward through space that had forgotten how to behave properly, following the epicenter to a barren moon that orbited a star in the process of dying. The surface below them was carved with structures that offended the eye, impossible geometries that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human mind could process. Those ruins, Torres muttered, staring at her scanner readings. They're not built on the surface. They're built into spacetime itself. The entire moon is just decorative. The away team descended through corridors that stretched longer than they should, past walls that pulsed with imprisoned starlight. Dar. Voss ran her hands along surfaces that felt like crystallized mathematics, while Solari kept his weapon drawn against enemies that might not exist in any conventional sense. The central chamber took their breath away, literally. The air itself recoiled from what waited within. A sphere of pure cosmic force hung suspended in the room's heart, surrounded by rings of metal that moved in patterns that made the watcher's eyes water. Within the sphere, a miniature black hole spun like a dark jewel, its event horizon flickering between states of existence. My God, Dr. Voss breathed, her scientific mind reeling between wonder and terror. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful and completely wrong. They've created an artificial singularity and somehow, tamed it. The storm we're experiencing is just the overflow, the excess energy bleeding into our reality. But as they interfaced with the facility's systems, the true horror revealed itself. Banks of data crystals held the memory of civilizations, entire species preserved in quantum amber. The singularity wasn't just a weapon, it was an incubator. A chrysalis for consciousness that had transcended the need for flesh, for matter, for conventional existence. The storm wasn't a mistake, Dr. Voss said, her voice hollow with the weight of understanding. It was the key to their return. The Aetherians had never truly died. They had merely evolved. Waiting in the spaces between dimensions for the moment to reclaim their empire. The temperature in the chamber plummeted as shadows began to move independently of their casters. The walls themselves seemed to inhale, and in that drawn breath, they appeared, the Aetherians. Not the ancient beings they had once been, but something far more terrible. Creatures of living void wrapped in the memory of flesh, their forms shifting between matter and concept. You have served your purpose admirably, the lead entity spoke, its voice arriving before the sound, creating echoes that preceded their source. Your species' expansion through the galaxy has identified suitable vessels for our return. Soon, all consciousness will serve the eternal empire. Death will serve. Life will serve. Even extinction will serve. What followed was not a battle in any sense that mortal minds could comprehend. The Aetherians wielded causality as a weapon, turning effect against cause. Commander Solari found himself fighting enemies who attacked him from next week while defending against assaults that had happened last century. The facility became a maze of temporal contradictions where the dead fought alongside the living against foes who had never been born. Lieutenant Nash aged backwards until he became a child, then forward until he crumbled to dust, then backwards again in an endless cycle of temporal torture. Chief Torres was scattered across 17 parallel dimensions, each version of her experiencing a different death while somehow remaining aware of all of them. Through the chaos, Dr. Voss stumbled toward the central control matrix, her mind pushed beyond its limits as she grappled with technology that treated physical laws as mere suggestions. The Aetherian mathematics were not designed for human comprehension, they were equations that described realities where consciousness was the fundamental force and matter merely an afterthought. Commander, she screamed over the sound of reality tearing itself apart. I can destabilize the containment field, but someone needs to. An Aetherian's touch began to unravel Solari's molecular bonds, his flesh becoming probability clouds. But even as existence fled from his bones, he thought of his crew, of the billions of lives hanging in the balance, of his sister's children who would never know their uncle's name. Do it, he commanded, his voice fracturing across multiple octaves as his vocal cords existed in several dimensions simultaneously. Whatever it takes. End this. Dr. Voss's fingers flew over controls that hurt to touch, her mind interfacing directly with cosmic forces that whispered seductive promises of power and knowledge. The artificial singularity began to destabilize, its carefully maintained equilibrium collapsing into beautiful, terrible chaos. The Aetherians realized the danger in the split second before it became irreversible. Their harmonious chorus became a shriek of rage that shattered the quantum foundations of local spacetime. They threw everything they had at the collapsing containment field, past, present, and future weapons firing simultaneously at a target that existed in a state of quantum superposition. But it was too late. The singularity, denied its artificial constraints, began to consume itself in a cascade of exotic matter reactions. Spacetime folded inward like origami made of light and darkness, pulling the Aetherians into the hungry void they had created. Their screams Doppler shifted across dimensions as they fell through the event horizon of their own making. In the heart of the storm, time fractured and space twisted into impossible knots. The fate of the galaxy balanced on a knife's edge made of crystallized mathematics. In the end, there was only one choice, to fight or let everything fall into the beautiful oblivion that waited beyond the edge of existence. The explosion, when it came, was visible from the next galaxy over. The Xenon Cluster briefly blazed brighter than the galactic core before collapsing into a void that would be marked on star charts as the Solari Gap, a wound in spacetime that would never fully heal. Dr. Voss found herself drifting in an escape pod she didn't remember entering, one of only 3 survivors from the Meridian. Through the pod's viewport, she watched the aftermath unfold like a slow-motion catastrophe filmed by gods. Where the cluster had been, space itself bore scars that pulsed with residual exotic energy. Entire systems had been erased so completely that not even their gravity wells remained. The storm had passed, but the scars it left would never fade. The galaxy would rebuild, as it always did, but the shadow of the Aetherians lingered in the quantum foam between stars. And in those quiet moments when the universe held its breath, Dr. Voss could swear she heard something that made her blood run cold, whispers from beyond the void, fragments of consciousness that had somehow survived their journey through the singularity's heart. Months later, in a research facility built on the edge of known space, she studied the energy patterns left by their final battle. The readings were disturbing, showing quantum signatures that suggested not destruction but transformation. The Aetherians had been masters of existence itself, perhaps even death was just another dimension for them to manipulate. Late one night, as she analyzed the data for what felt like the millionth time, her instruments detected something that should have been impossible, a signal buried so deep in the cosmic background radiation that it was almost lost in the universe's own breathing. But when she isolated it, enhanced it, and fed it through her translation algorithms, the message was crystal clear: the storm was only the beginning. We have learned. We have evolved. And we are coming home. Dr. Voss stared at the readout until her eyes burned, then looked up at the stars beyond her laboratory window. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, something vast and patient was stirring. The Aetherians had been students of cosmic horror, and death itself might have been their greatest teacher. She began composing a message to the surviving fleet commanders, a warning that would echo across every rebuilt world. The first storm had been weathered at terrible cost, but it had been merely an examination, a test to see how reality would respond to their touch. In the spaces between dimensions, where light was a foreign concept and causality a quaint suggestion, ancient minds that had transcended flesh, transcended death, transcended existence itself, began to plan their return. The singularity had not been their end, it had been their metamorphosis. And when they emerged from their cosmic chrysalis, they would bring with them storms that would make the destruction of the Xenon Cluster seem like a gentle summer rain. The galaxy had won its first victory against forces beyond comprehension, but the war for reality itself was only beginning. In the quantum static between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the spaces where possibility became actuality, a new storm began to gather its terrible strength. The universe held its breath and waited for the second movement in a symphony of cosmic horror that would make gods weep and cause existence itself to question its own nature. And in that waiting silence, something laughed.